With just days to go until the Georgia Senate runoff, a number of former partners of candidate Herschel Walker have come out with new allegations and accusations coming from their experience being involved in relationships with him. Now, this joins 1,000 scandals that have already broken both in advance of his candidacy as well as during it, having to do with claims of violence and secret families and children and pressured abortions and probably many things that I'm forgetting about this point because there's so many. But we do need to touch base with some of the claims that are being made here, understanding that full details are available at the Daily Beast. So the main claims, the thrust of this article comes from Cheryl Parsa, who had been involved in a 5-year relationship with Herschel Walker back in the 2000s. This began partially before his divorce and then on into the period where he began to be more open in public about his diagnosis with dissociative identity disorder. And we're gonna be touching on all of those topics in what Cheryl Parsa had to say. She starts by saying, he's a pathological liar, absolutely, but it's more than that. He knows how to manipulate his disease in order to manipulate people while at times being simultaneously completely out of control. She said that when she was with Walker, he used his diagnosis of DID as an alibi to justify lying, cheating, and ultimately destroying families. By the way, here is a photo of them from when they had been together. This is back in 2005. Photos of him with multiple of the women making these new allegations in the Daily Beast article is available there if you'd like to see. She is now one of 5 new former partners of his coming out with these claims. Things like lying and infidelity, again, things that we're well associated with when it comes to Herschel Walker, but new claims being added to the mountain. Parsa goes on to say he is not well, and I say that as someone who knows exactly what this looks like because I have lived through it and seen what it does to him and to other people. He cannot be a senator. He cannot have control over a state when he has little to no control over his mind. And we're gonna get into some of the additional claims of the way that she suffered when it came to his mental illness in a second. But Miranda, I wanted to get your thoughts about some of this new information that's coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is a really tricky and touchy topic when you throw in the dissociative identity disorder. So I think there is a huge problem with labeling people with mental illness as dangerous and therefore they get demonized in society. And so that's something I really want to stay away from here. However, there are people with mental illness who can be dangerous, just like there are many people without mental illness who can be dangerous. And I think that Herschel Walker falls under this umbrella no matter what. And so I think that it's definitely something to keep in mind, and that it also speaks to the fact that we don't have a lot of mental health help in this country. We don't have a lot of assistance, no matter how much the Republicans harp on mental health this, mental health that, whenever something goes wrong. There needs to be help for people with dissociative identity disorder and other, illnesses of the like. However, I think it's a tricky topic because you want to stick away from, well, okay, he's only doing all this because he's mentally ill. I don't think that's necessarily true. However, I think there can be a balance of, yes, he is lying, yes, he is manipulating, and yes, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. There's a lot about Herschel Walker's candidacy that has at various points led to, you have to tread carefully because it's very easy to make wild claims and accusations against people, and in American political history and political media history, that's been very common. And you're right, like we shouldn't demonize someone just because they have struggled with mental illness, as so many people have, and we shouldn't chalk up everything that he or any individual who struggles with mental illness does to their mental illness. It is possible that he has, as he's talked about, struggled with DID. It's also possible that, as Cheryl Parsa is saying, he is also kind of a genuinely bad guy who uses the fact that he's been diagnosed with DID to make excuses for the many things that he's done, which is bad in the context of his relationship, also does a massive disservice to other people struggling with mental illness. And look, maybe that covers some of the lying and some of the infidelity, some of the domestic abuse or his attempted murders or things. I don't know. What I do know though is that while, as you point out, there's definitely not enough societal acceptance for dealing with mental illness, let alone resources for it. I also know that someone can struggle with something like that and can come out the other side, or can be in an ongoing lifelong process of dealing with it. What I know with Herschel Walker, though, is that this is a guy who has said that he was saved by the grace of God, and that's it. Stop asking him questions. He's been saved, which is not really a great way to respond to the fact that many people have now pointed out that for several decades, you've been beating people and threatening to murder them. And the fact that it's not just that there are all these lies in your past that you can say you've moved past, but you keep lying now to this day. That suddenly becomes a bit of an issue. And we'll see if it's an issue for voters, Miranda, but it's an issue for me at least.
No, absolutely. It's an issue for me as well. I mean, I'm afraid that it's going to be pawned off as, oh, he's doing all of this because he has dissociative identity disorder. He's doing this because, maybe partially, like you said, maybe some of it is because of that, but he's doing this because that's who he is as a person. And, it does need to be taken seriously. He has threatened to, he has actually beaten people in the past. I mean, he's a dangerous person, and I think it needs to be brought in light in front of the voter base.
Yeah, and at the very least, like, if the idea is that you have struggled and you are now taking responsibility for it and dealing with it, well then, like when your adult son comes out with claims that he and his mom had to move 6 times in 6 months because you kept attacking them and threatening to kill them, and you refuse to even address that, well, that's a pretty big issue. Or if you believe that he's entirely making it up, or you believe that Cheryl Parsa is entirely making it up, if you believe that for some reason Herschel Walker is the biggest victim in history and he has been followed throughout his life, his personal life, his professional life, by a bunch of people that have framed him for lies and all sorts of crimes, that's weird. I think that requires a little bit of evidence if you want us to believe that. And I haven't seen any evidence presented that we should trust him more than all of these people when he has so many absolutely massive, irrational, insane lies in his past.
Absolutely, yeah.
By the way, there's a lot more information in the Daily Beast article about this, including claims being made by other former exes of his. They go in depth into how some of his alter egos, of which she identifies 20, he has previously talked about 12 or so, how they're organized into this pyramid, and at the top there are 3 unique identities that identify as Herschel Walker, and how some of them were more violent than others, and how in the middle of a conversation he would pivot from one to the next to the next. It's fascinating stuff. There should certainly be more, I think, empathy for and conversation about mental illness generally, DID specifically. But he's a flawed candidate in a lot of different ways. I honestly don't even know if any of this stuff having to do with his mental illness should be in the top 5 list of issues for a lot of people. When you lie about your education background, when you lie about your business background, up to and including just a few years ago, those are things that we should worry about. We have normalized a lot of dishonesty from politicians. Herschel Walker makes Ted Cruz look reliable by comparison, and that can't be acceptable.
Absolutely, yeah, you're 100% right. And I think that there's a lot to consider when it comes to Herschel Walker, and that whether his mental illness is even partially a part of it or not, there's a lot of reasons why he shouldn't be running for office, taking part in office. I agree, I don't think he is in a state to be able to run and manage the entire voter base for which he claims to want to be responsible for. And I think that if he has DID, no matter if it's serious, if it's not serious, I think there's a lot of different factors that would disqualify him from being eligible to run and be responsible for citizens.
Yeah, you shouldn't be able to just throw out like random words and remind people of all the reasons he shouldn't be a senator. Like if I said werewolf, what do you think of? When I say badge, what do you think of? If I say bad air, what do you think of? You should not have this, like, you could do one of those like word searches of all of the reasons having nothing to do with the ID that he is not qualified to be a senator.
Absolutely. Sometimes I feel like it's Michael Scott, like sometimes I start a sentence and I don't know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way. Almost every time Herschel Walker tells a story, I feel like that is the strategy he's using to tell his story. He just starts talking and then he says, well, I have to end this story and we're just gonna find the path along the way.
something vampires. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.